people like me. You need people like me so you can point your f***ing fingers and say, that's the bad guy.
The undisputed super featherweight champion of the world, Alicia, the Bumgarner.
That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy.
Welcome to the motherfucking relay. We're covering today's top boxing news.
Okay, we'll start with this. You may have heard Marisela Cornejo replaces Emma Kozin against Cecilia Brækhus. The WBC and WBO junior middleweight champion Emma Kozin has been unable to get a visa to enter into the United States and thus is not able to defend her titles on Saturday against Cecilia Brækhus on the Golden Boy Promotion show at the Mandalay Bay Hotel and Casino in Vegas. This fight was supposed to be going down on the undercard of Virgil Ortiz versus Sergey Bohachuk. Norway's Brækhus, 42 years old, will instead square off against Marisela Cornejo, who is 37. For the WBC interim title, Kozin, incidentally, is from Slovenia. Cornejo potentially represents a step up in class for Brækhus, who once looked unbeatable at welterweight and held world titles from 2009 to 2020 when she lost to Jessica McCaskill. Marisela Cornejo is really not a step up in class from who Cecilia was going to fight, the champion she was going to fight, Emma Kozin. I don't know why the author chose to characterize the situation that way. And I've got nothing against Marisela Cornejo, but fighting Marisela is a comparatively more winnable fight than if Cecilia would have had to fight Emma Kozin. Why is that? It's because over the years, Marisela Cornejo has lost to virtually every solid fighter, every elite fighter they've ever matched her against. They've stepped her up plenty of times, and that's why she's lost plenty of times. Now, given Cecilia Brækhus' age, that she's 42 years old now and has so obviously lost a step, I wasn't even sure if she could beat Emma Kozin, who's bigger and younger, and she's a southpaw. Emma Kozin, who's only ever lost one fight, just one fight, and that was to Clarissa Shields. I wasn't sure if Cecilia could beat her, but Marisela, she stands a better chance, a comparatively better chance against Marisela. Marisela Cornejo is 37 years old. Cecilia Brækhus is 42. They're both orthodox fighters, but Marisela Cornejo is a little taller and a little longer. Sporting a professional record of 19 wins with 6 losses, no draws, 7 knockouts, having never been knocked out in 25 professional bouts, to Cecilia Brækhus, who sports a professional record of 37 wins with 2 losses, 1 draw, 9 knockouts, having never been knocked out in 40 professional bouts. So when you're dealing with a fighter that's this age, 42 years old, irrespective of how talented they were, that may or may not speak to how they are here today. Not dissimilar from what we saw between Manny Pacquiao and Yordenis Ugas, that we know who the more accomplished fighter is. We know that Manny is many times over more accomplished than Yordenis Ugas was when they fought, many more times accomplished than he would ever be, but he was very old going into that fight. So Ugas won. Manny lost. Manny lost to the kind of fighter that he would have chewed up and spat out in his prime, but clearly he was past his prime years. Cecilia is past hers. Because of that, there actually is room for surprises. Because of that, that's what gives Marisela a fighting chance. That she is a few years younger and she is noticeably bigger. As well as being a short notice opponent. We know how those short notice opponents, they can throw a fighter off. Marisela Cornejo saw action 3 times last year, and she's already seen action 2 times this one. Once in February, then again in July. Frequency of fights, that schedule, against lower level competition still makes for a sharp fighter. A fighter that doesn't have any ring rust they need to shake off. Schedule Marisela Cornejo has been on is tantamount to saying that she's fought something like 4 or 5 times in the last 12 months, where Cecilia hasn't been as active.
Hasn't fought as much.
She has fought within the last 12 months, but she only fought once within the last 12 months. The Terry Harper fight in October of last year that was scored a draw. It's a quality over quantity kind of deal, to where Maricela has faced a greater quantity of opponents the last 12 months, but Cecilia, who hasn't been as active, faced a better quality of opponent.
But Terry Harper is a higher caliber, higher quality opponent than anybody Maricela's been fighting.
So here's the skinny. I ain't touching it. I'm not calling it. Because when a fighter's 42 years old, there's always room for Father Time to come in and take a little bit more out of them. If Cecilia Brækhus has still got it enough that she can beat a Maricela Cornejo, she's got to show it.
Well, I thought you said this fight was more winnable than the Emma Kozin fight.
It is, but we're talking about a fight where I didn't even know if Cecilia was going to beat Emma Kozin. And I don't know for sure if she's going to beat Maricela Cornejo. If she still is a fraction of the fighter that she used to be, then she should win. But should sometimes in the sport of boxing is a 4-letter word.
How many fighters have you seen lose a fight that they were supposed to be able to win, that they should have won?
Yeah, I'm riding the fence on this one. I'll just have to wait and see what happens. Men's welterweight news. The ongoing back and forth between Eddie Hearn, who believes that Terence Crawford lost this past Saturday, and Terence Crawford, who laid into him. Crawford said 5-0 against Matchroom, and Eddie ain't shit at darts. You better start thanking Turki Al-Sheikh for keeping you and these other clowns in business. Turki Al-Sheikh only cares about what's best for the fighters and the fans, not the people who have been destroying the sport. Let the haters hate. Either the fighter loses or leaves you. Appreciate greatness, Edward. To which Eddie Hearn responded, I gave you more promotion in 1 week than you've had in your entire career. You're welcome. Congrats on the win, though. Great fighter. Jaron Ennis is ready to make it 5-1. Terence responded by saying, thanks for taking the credit and hard work of Sila, Riyadh Season, and Turki Al-Sheikh. I don't remember seeing a Matchroom event like this. I said appreciate greatness. Start promoting your fighters and stop using my name. Safe travels, Edward. To which Eddie responded, your head's gone, Terence. Check my track record. I've never seen you this angry, and it doesn't suit you.
Eddie's not wrong.
About his track record and his contribution to the sport, I mean, I talked about this already, that before fighters like Terence Crawford and Isaac Cruz and Rayo Valenzuela, just everybody who fought this weekend, before any of them jumped on the Saudi bandwagon, it was Eddie Hearn and Matchroom that helped to open up that market. With the Joshua versus Ruiz rematch and the Joshua versus Usyk rematch, those were both in Saudi Arabia before any of these guys.
Americans have really big egos.
So big that either Terence Crawford doesn't know that, or he's pretending not to know that. Matchroom helped to open up that market, and all these opportunities that are now coming through, Matchroom helped to do that before anybody.
Matchroom, Eddie Hearn, they've been doing business in that region of the world with people in that region of the world since 2019. You guys are just now catching up in 2024.
Eddie Hearn mentioned his track record, and let's talk about his track record. Eddie Hearn managed to take Matchroom as a company to a place that his father didn't. His father, Barry Hearn. Yeah, Barry laid the foundations, and Eddie took it to the next level.
Matchroom was little more than just a domestic-level promotional company exclusive to the UK before Eddie Hearn took it to the next level. That's the truth.
While Matchroom was a successful company, Eddie Hearn took it to the next level, took it to the global stage, to where they're not just promoting shows in the UK or UK fighters anymore. They're promoting at a global level now, in the UK, in the US, in Mexico, Australia,
Saudi.
Matchroom and Eddie Hearn, you can't accuse them of holding up the sport. No, maybe you could say that about the PBC, and maybe you could say that about Top Rank and Golden Boy to an extent, but you can't say that about Matchroom, as Matchroom is a big part of the reason that women's boxing is on the up and up. All the success that they were having with Katie Taylor, when they decided to take a gamble and sign her and promote her fights, they expanded upon that success by signing even more female fighters and doing more female shows. To date, they do more women's bouts than anybody else. More than Top Rank, more than Golden Boy, and they were doing that before them.
They created a lot of the opportunities that women are getting today.
And they didn't stand in the way of Alicia Baumgartner versus Michaela Mayer. Even if they had to outsource Alicia, they did it. Just like they're outsourcing Sandy Ryan to a Top Rank show to fight Michaela Mayer.
Just like they were willing to outsource Felix Cash to fight Denzel Bentley, John Ryder to fight Zach Parker. You talk about people that are holding up the sport of boxing, and there are a few. Matchroom ain't one of them.
Eddie Hearn's not one of them. Frankly, I think that Terrence Crawford's comments are a bit off base. Maybe you have someone else in mind, some pent-up anger that you're misdirecting.
And promotion.
I think the people at Matchroom did a fantastic job of promoting the Israel Madrimov fight, and they would have had to because it involves one of their fighters. Whether Terrence Crawford liked it or not, the opportunity that came to him to become a 4-division champion,
You wouldn't have got it if it wasn't for Matchroom.
remember who it was initially supposed to be. It was supposed to be Sebastian Fundora, who was provisionally suspended until the end of the year. If not for Matchroom, you would have ended up having to wait on that guy to fight for a belt. But because Matchroom was willing and had a champion of their own, they created that opportunity for you.
Yeah, people ain't gonna like that, but that's the truth.
You got an opportunity with Matchroom that you would have had to wait on for months with the PBC.
Months and months and months. You would have had to wait until the fall.
And that's if Samson Lukowicz wouldn't have decided to give you the runaround when the time came. There are people in the sport that are responsible for damaging it and holding up fights, but I don't think Eddie Hearn is one of them.
Or Matchroom is one of them. Check the track record. Matchroom is now ranked as the most valuable promotional company in all of boxing. Ahead of Top Rank, ahead of Golden Boy, ahead of the PBC.
Queensbury, Boxer. Do you think that Matchroom's success and growth as a company is limited to when the Saudis got involved? They were already growing.
They were already global before Turkey decided to start making fights.
These are facts. Americans hate to admit it, but they've been outdone. And they've been outdone by a Brit. They've been outdone by Eddie Hearn, by Matchroom, and that's the truth. The only people that are guilty of what you're saying are your own people, the people here in America, the PBC specifically, because they're the ones who stifled your career. They're the ones who froze you out.
What you're saying applies to them, not Matchroom.
And finally, just in keeping with the theme of all things junior middleweight, veteran Australian boxing scribe Ben Damon said, Tszyu News, the IBF have ordered undefeated super middleweight champion Brækhus Murtazaliev to defend his belt against Australian Tszyu next. Negotiations on where and when are now underway.
This situation is a byproduct of what was supposed to be the Erickson lubricant fight.
And that fight's subsequent collapse. It was reported that Tszyu could end up facing either Jesus Ramos or Erickson Lubricant. Very recently, it was said that Erickson Lubricant would be unable to fight due to medical reasons.
Making Jesus Ramos the next worthy contestant. But you know what I said?
What?
What I said was, for fighting Jesus Ramos in an IBF eliminator to become the mandatory challenger, why not skip the foreplay and fight Brækhus Murtazaliev straight away? He's not busy with anything.
He didn't have a fight on schedule, didn't have a mandatory challenger in the queue. For scheduling an eliminator, why not just order the fight between Bacram and Tim? And it seems that someone at the IBF must have been watching, must have been of a similar mindset, because that's what they've gone ahead and done. And because the fight is mandated, because it's been ordered, that puts pressure on Bacram to travel.
I don't really think he wants to.
But there is a distinct possibility that he may have to travel for this fight with Tszyu because Brækhus Murtazaliev doesn't have the money or the promotion behind him that Tszyu has behind him. And the story was that Tszyu's next fight, it's going to be in Australia. So that puts Bacram in a position to where, unless somebody else steps in and puts the money up, he may have to travel. Brækhus Murtazaliev, the least known champion of the 3 reigning champions in today's junior middleweight division. There is unified champion Sebastian Fundora, newly crowned WBA champion Terrence Crawford, and of course, Brækhus Murtazaliev, who's got the IBF and won the vacant title in his last fight against Jack Colquet, who he stopped.
Why doesn't anybody know him?
So Brækhus Murtazaliev originally became the mandatory challenger by way of the IBF way back there in 2019. And he took a series of step-aside deals in the subsequent years that followed that saw him fighting on the non-televised portions of PBC shows. He was fighting, but people didn't see him because his fights were buried on undercards. So now that he's become IBF champion, most people are not familiar with this fighter. They're not familiar with Bakhram Murtazaliev. Hell, his fight with Jack Colquet was all the way out there in Germany. Here in America, they didn't have a broadcast partner for that show, making him largely unknown to anyone who actually follows the junior middleweight division. And thus, he ain't got much marquee value, nowhere near as much as Tim.
Which is why he might have to travel.
Now, I happened to catch the Colquet versus Murtazaliev fight. I managed to catch that fight after it was over, after the fact, and Jack Colquet was winning that fight. He was winning that fight until he tired out, started getting hit, and got stopped. But if a 37-year-old Jack Colquet can give him that many problems, I'd wager that Tszyu can give him even more problems. Enough that he will lift the IBF title away from him. I have Tim winning the fight.
I think he's going to become IBF champion.
And if he does, that puts him in Terence Crawford's crosshairs, Turki Al-Sheikh's crosshairs. Now, when it comes to Tim, I've always gotten the impression that he wants to make a name for himself outside of Australia. He really wants to make a name for himself here in the United States, here in America, because for a fighter with the following that he has in Australia, to travel here for a Terrell Gausha fight in Minneapolis at the Armory.
It's a waste of time.
For a fighter that has the following he has in Australia, to travel here for the likes of a washed-up Keith Thurman or a late replacement in Sebastian Fundora, when you could have called the whole thing off.
Gives me the impression he wants to make a name for himself here in America like his father did when he beat Zab Judah.
By now we all know that Turki Al-Sheikh is very much invested in the career of Terence Crawford. Things aren't working out for a Canelo Alvarez fight. That ship has sailed. That doesn't look to be happening. So one fight that he can make if Tim becomes IBF champion is a unification match between Tim Tszyu and Terence Crawford.
And Fundora?
He's really tall and he's really skinny.
That's not what I meant.
That's one way it could break down. Terence Crawford versus Tim Tszyu, somewhere here in America, backed by Turki Al-Sheikh.
Another way it could break down is Tszyu versus Sebastian Fundora 2, the rematch.
They could do that too. They could do that too here in America, though I don't think Tim would make the money fighting Sebastian for a second time that he could make fighting Terence Crawford, because Terence has Turkey behind him. Sebastian does not.
All he's got is a snake oil salesman behind him in Samson Lukowicz,
who I'm sure will try to inject his fighter, his champion, into those conversations to try and get at some of that Saudi money. That's the best money in boxing right now, short of fighting a Canelo Alvarez or fighting an Anthony Joshua. Right now, the best money in boxing, besides them, is the Saudi money.
There's a few ways it could break down if Tszyu becomes IBF champion, and I think he's going to. Now it's just a question of ironing out a deal with Bakhram, scheduling the fight, and then getting the job done, which I think Tim will.
Tim's coming off the first loss of his career to Sebastian Fundora for what can only be described as a freak accident in the fight.
But he's still hungry.
I think he's still hungry. Some fighters lose a fight, they're never the same. Fighters like Wilder, fighters like Thurman.
Errol Spence.
Never the same. But not Tim. I think Tim can rebound. I think he's going to be all right, and I think he's still hungry. I think he's going to win.
He's going to become IBF champion.